Hello, welcome, and good evening to all. We are back. It's Tuesday. So glad to be here with expert panel. I'm your host, Zuhair Hussain. Um, as usual, today we have brought this very special program for our listeners, for our viewers around the well-being and mental health of our youth, in particular, children, and how it affects our community. A very concerning subject that relates to the wider community, not just the Pakistani, not just the Indian. In fact, it's out there for everyone. So it's something of great concern, and we obviously see it as an issue where we believe we should speak about this, and there's a big need of awareness to be raised within the community so people understand it better. To talk about this subject, I've got the executive director of Citizens Commission on Human Rights Victoria, Miss Kim Cullen, with us. Um, a little bit about Kim before I bring her into the program. Kim was trained as a teacher and helped set up a private school in Mooloolbark, Victoria, where she taught for 10 years. So obviously she's got good understanding and great background of working and teaching kids. Um, this was her introduction into the world of kids being labeled as having attention deficit disorder. Obviously, a disorder that's found in kids, diagnosed in kids apparently, and they are given with this horrendous antidepressant drug, which obviously has some severe impacts and side effects on those young minds. Kim has advocated heavily on the ground regarding this issue in raising awareness. Then she moved to Sydney, and after starting the Citizens Commission of Human Rights in the chapter in New South Wales, she stayed there for about 10 years. Then she moved back, and now obviously she's still advocating for this very significant and noble cause. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present you Miss Kim Cullen. Let me add her to the stream. Good evening,
Oh,
Kim.
good evening, Zuhair, and thank you for that very, very lovely introduction. I just want to correct one thing there.
Sure.
With the ADHD, that's attention deficit hyperactive disorder, that is a disorder which is actually a made-up disorder that's given to kids who are hyperactive, not doing what they're told, bouncing around the room. They might be having different problems. And the drugs that they usually give these children is not antidepressants, but a different type of drug, which is probably another show entirely. But it's if you've heard about cocaine, you've heard about Ritalin. Ritalin is what's called like a kiddie cocaine. It's very similar, and that's what they're giving our kids. So, but we're not going to talk about that tonight, but definitely we can talk about that another time.
100%. So as thanks for that little correction. Obviously, I was just reading it
No
off my
problem.
Now, when you were at the school that you set up, how did you come about? How did you get to know about this issue and how kids are being diagnosed, or as we say, diagnosed with this disorder?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I was at this school. We actually started it. I helped start it and came in at its inception. And what was happening is that we were having parents bring their kids to the school. Like, we had a lot of, ordinary everyday kids as well, right? But we had specific kids that came, and they'd been having a lot of trouble in mainstream schools. And they'd been told that they were hyperactive, they couldn't sit still, they couldn't learn, and they had these huge problems. And so we'd take them on. because we all had big hearts and we wanted to help these little kids who are having a lot of problems. And so I dealt with quite a few of these children. They usually gave them to me because I tended to be able to handle the toughies quite well. And often these kids had learning problems. You know, they were either behind or they were so smart they were just, you know, they were totally bored. A couple of the kids that we handled had severe allergies, which would react with them, and then that would affect their behaviour. So it was like, to me, it was a bit of an eye-opener because I had my own children at the school, and there was, you know, most kids that I taught, you know, they were great. And then I'd come across these other children, and it was like, well, they're just kids and they've got problems. So let's find out what's actually really going on with them. So we'd work with a brilliant naturopath who's actually still around, and she would do the whole testing, you know, because always what we look for first is an underlying medical condition. And the underlying medical condition is not just things like heart problems or diabetes or something like that. But, you know, people can have severe allergies or genetic abnormalities that can actually cause them to have specific problems that react in specific ways. So we helped these kids, and we gradually weaned them off the drugs and got them so that they're operating, able to operate in life well. So that was my passion there, because it's always been kids.
Right. Now, when at what age do normally parents can detect that hyperactiveness in their kids?
Oh, look, you can, do you have kids? How many kids have you got?
I've got a daughter.
You got a daughter. How old is she?
She's 4.
Okay. So sometimes you might find she doesn't want to go to bed. Right? I don't want to go to bed tonight, Daddy. I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. And she might be a little bit of a, you know, a bit of a bugger, as we say, right?
Sure.
Or she might you out and she just won't do as you say, or she has some specific food and then she just goes like totally, you know, or she may be totally perfect. I don't know. She probably is since she's your daughter. But parents are told that there's something wrong with their children. And, you know, I mean, you can have a child that is, you know, totally hyperactive. I've seen kids running up and down walls, literally, you know, this bookshelf behind me. I saw one little kid once, you know, sort of, you know, almost tearing the bookshelf apart. And it would always go back to their diet, their behaviour as they're treated, and something going on that they can't express in a normal way, so they act it out. So we have, you know, the terrible 2 tantrums. You know, I've seen children, and I've been involved with children who are in a supermarket and they're kicking their legs and banging on the floor. That's a tantrum, right? Because the kid is starting, at 2-year-old, starting to find themselves, express themselves, and they can be very easily labelled. Whereas it's just like, come on, these are kids, they're growing up, they have to develop. You need to, as a parent, you need to be able to set boundaries. You know, you go, this is how far you're allowed to go on that. If you just let your kids go wild, what are you going to expect? You're going to end up with a wild child. But what age do you see it? Look, Zuhair, it depends on the individual, because as with all of this, we have to look at the individual. And according to the statistics that we have children as young as babies being put on psychiatric drugs, dangerous mind-altering psychiatric drugs for particular symptoms that they may have.
Now, can a normal GP just do the diagnostic and just recommend that drug, or how do they get onto the drug?
Absolutely. And it's really unfortunate, because doctors are great. You know, we go to our doctors, we trust our doctors as we should, and we expect our doctors to look after us and to tell us what's going on. Unfortunately, what happened in Australia about a few years ago, probably about, I can't give you exactly, about 10 years ago, the doctors in Australia were trained on this program called Sphere. And in that program, they were actually trained to diagnose and medicate children with psychiatric drugs. Prior to that, they wouldn't have been doing that. They would have been looking at underlying causes, what's going on. So basically what's happening now with the antidepressants and the psychiatric drugs that are being prescribed in Australia, 78% of those are from doctors. So it's a matter of education, re-education, and one of the big things that, and probably one of the most important things, is having informed choice. So if you're educated, you can say, you can make a decision on it. If you don't know, how are you going to make a decision based on, you just don't know what to do? If your kid's playing up and the doctor who you respect and care for, which I would expect that to be factual, says to you, look, I'm really concerned about your child. Your child's really depressed and therefore we need to put them onto antidepressants. You may feel, oh my God, this is really terrible. However, you may listen to your doctor, but you can ask the question. You can say, what is going on with my child that they're feeling depressed? Why are they so sad? Why are they acting this out? And what we've been through in Victoria, in particular in Melbourne, with this lockdown, if we've had this incredibly unusual situation where we've had to be locked inside. We've been inside. We haven't had our usual freedoms. Kids haven't been at school. Parents have been, teaching their kids, doing homeschooling, trying to cope with work. And it's been an incredibly stressful time for people. We would have had changes in our diet. We would be less sunshine, less exercise. And these are all factors that are really vital to a healthy lifestyle. So what I would just recommend there is that, if you have someone tell you that, you need to have antidepressants or you think that antidepressants would work, ask them, have a look at the little tiny writing on the back of this. There's a piece of paper that you get inside the drugs, and it tells you exactly what side effects that you can expect from that. And with these antidepressants, one of the side effects, and obviously extreme, and it would be very rare, but we can go into that, is suicide or suicidal thoughts. So if someone offers you a drug or offers to give your child a drug that has possible suicidal thoughts or for them to commit suicide, you're going to give that to your kid? No way. You'd be a fool if you did. Yeah.
Right. Now, a lot of the reasons that you just explained, they just seemed normal everyday reasons: eat well, exercise, go out, get fresh air, get sunshine, things like that. When a doctor is prescribing a kid with such a severe and serious drug, what are your thoughts that aren't they exploring, aren't they finding out if these basics are being covered? And why aren't they consider, or why don't they consider counseling or such therapy for kids where a therapist can talk to the kid and perhaps counsel them that way?
That's a really good question, and I don't know. Because I'm not a doctor and I'm not sitting in the doctor's office.
Cool.
I have read some of the research from doctors and what they're saying and the problems that they've been facing. And I think doctors are facing huge problems with this pandemic that we've all gone through, that they don't know what to do. They really don't have the solutions. And perhaps because they're not doing those full medical exams, maybe they don't even know that there's particular things that you can test for. Like, for example, this naturopath that we worked very closely with, she would do a hair analysis. And with a hair analysis, you get a bit of hair and you can actually test for a huge range of conditions that aren't available through normal blood tests. Like, for example, if you have, no zinc in your body, that can affect something. If you have too much copper, or if you have mercury in your body, all these things actually come out in in the hair. So that's not a common test that a doctor would do. A very close friend of mine has a genetic disorder, and it's a genetic anomaly called MTHFR. And it's a gene that causes, it's a mutated gene that just because, gene studies is fairly new in this, in our studies that we've been doing. They've found up to 60 to 70% of people have this, at least one or sometimes two of these mutated genes that they have no idea, right? And having this gene can cause things like chronic fatigue, heart problems, miscarriages, and things like depression, anxiety, stress, all of these things which are caused because that particular gene stops the body from metabolizing specific vitamins that affect the body and affect the mind and make a person feel these ways. And she was like years and years and years, most of her life, wondering why I'm so fatigued all the time, why she can't eat certain things, why am I feeling so depressed sometimes? And she would just have no idea. And then she just found out in the last 4 years that she's actually got this particular genetic mutation, which is very common. And it's very simple to find that out. You go to the local doctor and you say, if you've tried everything else, you can say, please test me for MTHFR. And they'll say, why? And you say, well, I'm feeling really depressed. I don't know why. Or I'm feeling like I've got chronic fatigue and I don't know why. And it costs $70. It's not a free test to do. It costs $70. But I tell you, if that was happening to me, I'd be searching all different avenues.
Right. You have been advocating about this concern and this issue for 20 odd years now. What's your view on how does the state government and federal government, is there enough awareness? Do they acknowledge this as an issue? What's the go there?
I think they're starting to now, Zuhair. They're starting to acknowledge it now, and I'll tell you just a little bit of the history of that. In June last year, 2020, a scientific research paper was put out by some prominent people, Dr. Martin Whiteley, who's in Western Australia, Melissa Raven, who's I think she's in South Australia, and Dr. John Giardini, who's a psychiatrist in South Australia. And in this paper, they actually showed very clearly that there was a link between, in the last 10 years, there was an increase in the antidepressant drugs like that, and an increase, the same line of statistics. I don't have the graph to show you. It was sort of parallel. So you had increase in antidepressants and an increase in suicide. And that paper's quite incredible. And that went to what was his name? There was one of our members of parliament in Dandenong, Julian Hill, was given that paper by his mate Martin Whiteley, I understand, and he then took it into Parliament. He asked questions in Parliament, and as a result of that, the federal Health Minister Greg Hunt started an inquiry on that, and that is how this has started to be exposed. And fortunately, yesterday in the paper, media, it was in 33 different articles. There was this article, it's called, and I do have it here, Suicide Fears as Antidepressant Use Among Australian Kids Soared. And it was written by Sue Dunleavy, who's a news correspondent for News Corp. And so this is a special investigation that News Corp is doing, and they said, I'll just read it if that's okay.
Sure.
1 in every 33 children, including preschoolers, is taking antidepressant medication. As concerns mount, the drugs could be driving up youth suicide rates. The medical regulator has called on doctors to review their prescribing of the controversial drugs after it found use of the medications had soared by 36% in the last 5 years. Alarmingly, it found suicide rates had also increased across all age groups among 0 to 14-year-olds. But it said that there was not enough evidence to say the drugs were the cause. I just want to say there, obviously it's not 0 kids committing suicide from, babies, but that's the age group that we look at in that bracket. It's the 0 to 14-year-olds. Medical professionals and parents are calling for warning labels to be placed on the outside of antidepressant packets. And while the direct connection between antidepressants and suicide is still being investigated, specialist doctors report there can be severe and long-lasting withdrawal symptoms when people try to get off the drugs. So one of the things we always say is that if any of your listeners or are on any of these drugs right now, don't just get freaked out and say, I've got to go off them. You need to go see a competent medical doctor and actually get yourself weaned off these drugs, because the effect of going off the drug can actually have worse consequences than when you're on them. So that is that's the article, and just I don't know if I can show you this if you're going to be able to see it, but here's some of the increase in the statistics. So you see over this side, that bar up there, right? That is that shows 2019. So you've got this two different. You've got this from here. You can't see 2013 down here to 2019 there, and it's like they said a 33% increase or whatever it was, 35% increase. So just one more thing I'll just read out to you on that, Zuhair, is that antidepressants are not registered for the treatment of depression in anyone under the age of 18 in Australia. Yet, more than 175,000 people in this age group were on them in 2019.
Right.
So that is pretty horrendous. That's 175,000 people in Australia under the age of 18 who are on these antipsychotic drugs, these antidepressant drugs that can cause these horrendous. So if you look at your statistics, right?
Yeah.
How many people in Australia, right? You look at, the population of Australia, 25 million or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got 175,000, which is probably, 2%, something like that on drugs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't done the maths. I'll just do it in my head just briefly, right?
Sure.
So you've got 175,000 people. Now, if just 1% of those people, just 1%, that's 17,500 people, right? Is that right? No,
Correct.
that's 10%. No, sorry, 1% is 1,700 people.
Yeah, 1,750.
Yeah, right. If 1% of these people have suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts, or commit suicide, you've got a huge amount of people harming themselves,
100%.
right? And that's what we need to let people know about. These drugs are dangerous. They need warnings on them, and people need to be reporting the effects of them.
Now, obviously, one would think, and you can comment better on that, that if a child, if a parent notices a change of behavior, how a child has lost all the energy and all the spark about them, and if they have, if they've stopped talking to them and they've become less talk, these are all the alarm bells that are ringing in any given house where, parents, like the first step should be parents talking to the kids and trying to figure out a counseling or a therapeutic sort of way where they can talk about this issue and try and get to the bottom of it. So like is there enough support out there from the government to the parents for such, or are there enough NGOs working out there that parents can reach out to?
I can't really answer that. I don't think there's ever enough, but I think also that the resources aren't always put into the correct areas.
Right.
Right? If we, for example, had holistic medicine, naturopathic medicine, like I'll give you an example. One of my allies is a guy called Dr. Ian Brighthope, and he'd probably love to come on your show because he's definitely an expert. He's a far more expert than I am, and he knows more about mental health than most people I know. But he is a trained doctor, and over 40 years he trained doctors in naturopathic and natural medicines. And basically he helped thousands and thousands of people get off antidepressant drugs and other psychiatric drugs, and actually found out what was going on with them before they got to that point, right? Because he was using, as a medical doctor, he was using other modalities. He was actually finding out what was going on underlying. And I know one of the things that causes this is inflammation, like inflammation in the brain, for example, which is caused by diet, can be caused by chemicals. It can be caused by the foods you eat, right? So, or just inflammation in the body as well. And it's fairly common in our society, I think, to see people that, you know, aren't eating properly, aren't, you know, probably drinking too much, you know, maybe, you know what I mean? Their lifestyle isn't,
Sure.
I mean, my lifestyle's not as great as it could be neither, you know, but I think that there's not, to answer your question, I think the resources that we have aren't always going in the right direction. And I could say if every single person who presents with a mental illness or feeling depressed, because people do feel depressed, there's no doubt about it. People do feel anxious. They do get worried. They have their ups and downs in their life.
Right.
And every single person, before a psychiatric label is put on them, is given a total, full, 150% medical examination to find an underlying cause. I guarantee that you could cut down the amount of mental illness in this country at least by 2/3, at least.
Right. The statistics that you explained or shared with us earlier on, that such psychiatric drugs are not to be prescribed to individuals under the age of 18, and
Yeah.
about 175,000 people are being given those drugs. So isn't there a regulatory body around that area that can sort of wake up to it and regulate this issue?
Well, this is what this is about now. This is what this this media, this expose is all about, is getting, because the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, is our drug regulatory board. In the United States, it's the Food and Drug Administration. Right? I don't know what they have in Pakistan, probably something similar. But we have here the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and they regulate the drugs that come into Australia. Now, part of what happened with this study that was done by, that I mentioned before, the TGA put the warnings on the drugs, right, 10 years ago. The warnings are on the drugs, but there were certain experts and other people who were very influential in the mental health area, who basically said that these, you know, the risk of suicide is worse than going on these drugs. And so that it was skewed around. And so therefore, a lot of the warnings were basically ignored.
Right.
Or not made less of. And you
Right.
need to get the full understanding of that. You really need to read the whole paper, and it is available. And I'm happy to send it to you, and you can share it with your viewers. But absolutely, and that's what we're trying to do now. We want people to, there's our number there and our email, our website, and we want to help people actually fill out those adverse drug reaction forms. Because if you're on a drug, a psychiatric drug, and you're feeling more anxious, or you're feeling sick, or you're not being able to, one of the problems is weight gain. A lot of people gain weight on these psychiatric drugs. Some people are totally fine, and you know what? That's okay. But what we want to do is we want to talk to the people that aren't fine, so that we can help them fill out these adverse drug reaction forms, get them into the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and get much harsher regulations put on these drugs, so that doctors go, hey, let's not give this kid these drugs. Let's find out what else we can do.
Right. Yep. So anybody listening out there, obviously, Kim's advice is if in the community anybody has been on those drugs and have had a severe reaction or any adverse reaction to it, please reach out to the numbers that are given there. The website is there. So what just to quickly wrap up the program, what are the initiatives or the current projects that your organization is having at the minute, or what are the key things that your organization is working on besides this?
Mostly we're working on this, Zuhair, because it is such a big thing to do, and we really need to get people to do these complaints. But there are other complaints that we're after as well, because there are human rights abuse in the area of psychiatry. So if you've been in a psychiatric hospital and you've had a human rights abuse as a result of being there, we also will help you do the complaint. But a lot of what we do is we educate people, because I've been doing this for many years, and if I have lots of flyers and pamphlets, and we do exhibitions. We haven't done one in the last 12 months, obviously, because we've all been in lockdown, but we hope to get very soon back out into the expos and places like that. We educate people, we give out free information, and we let them get informed so they can make a decision on the best thing for themselves and their families.
Lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Kim Cullen talking about mental health, specifically in kids, and how these drugs are being given to the kids in our community. It could happen in any household. So obviously the message is clear. Read the labels before you take any medicine, any medication around such areas where it relates to mental health and mental well-being of your children. And please reach out to the Citizen Commission on Human Rights Victoria if you have had any adverse effects or any issues or any such case of violence. Thank you ever so much, Kim, for your precious time. It was wonderful to have you on show. And if ever there is another opportunity in the future, we would get in touch, and we would love you to come back and share more of your experiences.
Thank you, Zuhair. Lovely to be on the show.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this was today's program for you. We had Kim Cullen, some real insight and some eye-opening figures and stats she shared with us. Obviously, Pakistan Welfare Organization Australia is constantly striving to talk about issues that can benefit community. We don't care about what's the reach of our program, for example, as long as if after listening to our program we are able to help one family, if one parent can maybe look at the medication that their doctor has prescribed to their child, and if it raises any alarm bells, they get onto this issue and we can help and save a child's life. That's the mission accomplished for our program and for the cause that we are working on. I hope this program was informative to you, and you got to know a little bit about this issue that exists in our community. We will be back next Tuesday, same time, with another exciting guest, with another important and critical subject to the community. Until then, take care of yourself, and goodbye.
Skilled migration. Skilled migration visa assistance. Australia is now offering permanent residency status to general skilled migration visa holders. Stay connected with us to get updated information on skilled independent visa, subclass 189, skilled nominated visa, subclass 190, skilled sponsored visa, subclass 491, and skilled regional visa, subclass 887. Contact Think Higher Consultants at thinkhigher.com.au. Student visa. Is it your dream to study